Are you looking for a homeschool curriculum that's flexible, engaging, and approved for Step Up for students? Let me tell you about Discover by Bridgeway Academy. It's more than just a curriculum, it's really a journey. Discover is designed for students in grades 1 through 8, and it blends colorful hands-on lessons with the flexibility homeschool families need. Whether it's language arts, math, science, or social studies, each subject is built to meet academic standards and, most importantly, spark curiosity. And it's all designed to fit your unique schedule. With built-in lesson plans, progress tracking, and online support, Discover takes the guesswork out of homeschooling. So whether you're brand new or a seasoned pro, you'll feel confident from day one. Now, if you're not using state funding, you can get 20% off with promo code DISFPEA20E at checkout. Visit discoverk8learning.com. That's discoverk8learning.com. Again, that's discoverk8learning.com to learn more and save today.
And then it was no, and I didn't really feel any other options. And then the door opened again. So that's kind of took me from, kind of the adventure, horseback riding, playing in the woods, Jeremiah, to, okay, well, what am I going to do about the world that I'm living in? And maybe take these ideas, these inspiration, the wisdom from these great stories, and try to use that to make a difference.
From the Florida Parent Educators Association, home of the largest homeschool convention in America, this is the Not by the Book podcast. I'm your host, FPEA Chairman Suzanne Nunn, and together we will hear from guests who share their journey to who and where they are today. Each one of them at some point left the expected path, ripped the page out of the book that says you have to do it like this, and made their own way. I hope these conversations inspire you as much as they do me. Today I have a conversation with Jeremiah Lorrig, Director of Generation Joshua. We have such a great time talking about adventure, the impact of story in our lives, and following passion that leads to meaningful growth and lifelong learning. Finally, Jeremiah shares wisdom to remind us how we all should walk our journey in such a way that we can make a difference in the world. Listen with me now.
So I grew up in Colorado, and I would say to Jeremiah as a little boy, there was a toy of the millennium and a toy of the century. The toy of the millennium was the stick. I would play in the woods, run around. My stick could be a sword, it could be a musket, it could be a World War II bayonet. I had an active imagination and loved to turn the sticks into bows and arrows and everything else. The toy of the century was the Legos. I would spend hours building gigantic castles and cathedrals, and I just really, really enjoyed creating with Lego sets.
So that imagination was a little bit wild. Where were you getting the formation of the, castles and the stories that you would play out in your sticks and wooded forests? Where did those stories come from?
Wow. So I think, that would go back even farther to little Jeremiah, like baby Jeremiah. I was one of those kids who was a handful, and my mom didn't know what to do with me. So she put me in one of those, I think it was called a Johnny Jump Up. You'd hang it between a door and it had a spring. Yeah. That apparently saved my mom's life. And she didn't know what to do with me. So she put me in there, and she was like needing something to make the time pass. So she pulled out an old set of the Chronicles of Narnia, and she started reading them. And so she started reading me the Chronicles of Narnia before I could talk or understand. But I think that started building the imagination, because as you know, C.S. Lewis is a master storyteller, and he really believes in the imagination and the power of the imagination to help shape our souls and to help us grow into the people that we were designed to be. So I would say it started in a Johnny Jump Up and the tales of Narnia and kings and centaurs. But it continued with when I was homeschooled. So I was homeschooled all the way through. And one of the things my mom would do is I'm dyslexic. And so with extreme dyslexia, it meant that I didn't read until quite late. So my mom and dad had to read to us. And so continuing that tradition of reading in the Johnny Jump Up, every night they would read a chapter from the Bible and a chapter or a story. It's obviously it started with things like Dr. Seuss, but it grew to various adventure stories and fairy tales and like the chapter books that you would expect. And I think all of that really continued what started in the bouncy chair.
That's a really rich world of formation for your imagination. It's just, there are so many adventure stories and so many fantasy worlds and things that you're exposed to. And I think that that's really interesting to me and incredible because I've asked this question of a lot of people now, and really taking it back to the Johnny Jump Up might be the earliest response that I've had. But, I think that it's great to point that out because so many people, I know even when I was having my kids, people talked about reading out loud to your children in the womb, because of the connection to your voice and so many things in storytelling. But people who are told stories, I think, become great storytellers. And people who can, enjoy and appreciate the world of others' imaginations are able to imagine and create. And I think that's amazing. And just knowing you the way I do, that gives me a whole window of understanding of the person that I know that I didn't know about the Johnny Jump Up before, but now we do. So that's great. So you were young, you were homeschooled, which is another great training ground and grounds for experience in the world and doing things you love, leaning into your passions. So as you started, getting a little bit older and leaning into your passions, what were they? Where did you start finding some of the passions in your life?
That's a good question. And I would say part of it kind of came through my parents being, they had their radar up for what kinds of things would catch our attention. And I loved animals and I loved horses. And my mom was a horse person, and she had been reading about the benefits for dyslexic people to do things that increased your hand-eye coordination. And so she was like, let's see if we can find a barn. And horseback riding lessons could be expensive and all that kind of stuff. So starting pretty young, I spent a lot of hours in a barn cleaning stalls. And I honestly don't know the economics of the situation, but I was told that that was part of how we were paying for my horseback riding lessons. And so I was there with a rake and a bag of basically sawdust. I forget what we called it.
Yeah.
But it was every day going out there working the barn, and I discovered a couple things there. Number one, horses like people have personalities, and they have opinions, and some of them will like you, some of them won't. And I also learned kind of the need or the value of work, where if you want to do something, work is the key that unlocks doors, because we need to, I think a lot of people today look at work and they're like, oh, it's this drudgery, this thing that I have to do. And I'm very thankful that I learned early on that if I wanted something, work wasn't a drudgery, work was the opportunity to do those things. And so as a little kid, I wanted to be good at horseback riding. And I wanted to be the like my mom read me books like The Black Stallion and, the adventure stories with horses, little boys and horses. Billy and Blaze, those kinds of books. I don't know if these are ringing any bells for anybody in the audience, but those were my childhood. And so I wanted to be good at it, and I did. Like my horse riding instructor, her daughter, I was riding her daughter's horse, and her daughter was my age. So we went to a horse show, and her daughter got to ride her horse in the age appropriate category. But because we only had one horse, I had to ride that same horse in the adult category. And I won. I got the blue ribbon. I beat all these adults. Now, it was, beginner level, right? So it was beginner level adults and everything. But I remember, and I think this was formative too, I remember going to the tack shop, which is where you get horse supplies. And, I grew up out west, so everything, we have our own language a little bit sometimes. But we went to the tack shop, and we were picking up some stuff. And the person behind the counter, he was like one of those like stereotypical cowboy, kind of grizzled guys. And he looks down, he's like, "Wait, are you the kid who went to the horse show and took all the prizes?" Kind of, those moments of things that, you probably wouldn't remember it if it didn't hit you, and you kind of have a little bit of self-accomplishment that you realize I have done something that was notable. And so horseback riding was definitely a passion of little Jeremiah, probably between the ages of like 7 and 15 was kind of that era.
And it's a lot of good work ethic built into that too. So that is good. So you were mentioning a little bit about dyslexia and being a late reader. It's funny to me because, I know that there's a lot said about people who are dyslexic, often are people who have like big picture, big vision ideas, big things that they see, that they work out in their brain that they want to do. And you can see kind of all the details. Was there a point that you started looking at your challenges, maybe with reading and dyslexia, ever feeling like something was going to hinder what your dreams were going to be or what your passions were going to be because of your challenges there?
Well, and I'm super thankful for homeschooling. Here's why. So I was diagnosed with extreme dyslexia when I was quite small. My parents had me in a Sunday school group at church, and the Sunday school teacher, she had us all. She wrote our names on a piece of paper, and we were supposed to copy it. And I copied my name, Jeremiah, mirror image backwards. And she noticed that, and she, when my parents came to pick me up, she said, "Hey, I'm the leading expert in dyslexia in the state of Colorado, and I would like to, if you're willing, test your son because I think he's dyslexic." And they, went through whatever process adults go through, and I remember getting diagnosed. And the crazy thing to me, looking back, is that nothing happened. Nothing changed. They got the diagnosis, and I guess it changed on their end. It changed their strategies for how to teach me. But from my end, I didn't get a label of special ed. I didn't get we've got to put him in special classes or anything like that. I got well, this is a challenge. We're going to have to figure out how to overcome that challenge because reading is extremely important. You've got to be able to read signs and receipts, and that's just in day-to-day life, let alone the knowledge that is unlocked by reading, and more importantly, the wisdom. And because I firmly believe that cultures store their knowledge in nonfiction books, but our wisdom in fairy tales and adventure stories, novels. So my parents had to reassess how they taught me, but they were able to adjust so that it didn't hold me back. While my reading was delayed, I didn't start reading until I was 11. I'll tell that story in a minute. But the everything else, they just found ways to, whether it was reading to me about George Washington, or I remember my mom reading me about Rosa Parks, a book about Rosa Parks. And, even young, they were like, history is, you're not going to be held back in the other areas. But reading was very difficult, and they tried everything. They tried old like McGuffey Reader type programs. They tried cutting edge programs. They tried a lot of things, but honestly, what kicked in and got me reading was I told you my mom and dad would read to me every night. My dad was reading us the Hardy Boys. And the Hardy Boys adventure, mystery series was, the mystery, the plot was thickening. And I would say, can you read another chapter? And he was like, you can read it. Well, I was struggling to read basic Dr. Seuss level words like cat on hat, things like that. So it was, that was a very daunting thing. But I really, really wanted to know what happened next. So the next day, I sat down on the couch with the Hardy Boys book, and I was slowly sounding out each letter to each word to each sentence, and it clicked. I went from basically not able to read Dr. Seuss to struggling, but still moving forward with the Hardy Boys. And that was when I was right when I was 11. I think it was right before my 11th
motivation
birthday.
To get the rest of the story. That was
Exactly.
Yes.
I wanted to know the mystery.
Motivation inspires. So that's great. And I think that it's one of the things that for me, is just a testament to one of the beauties of homeschooling is the customization. And, like you said, being able to work and to try to overcome challenges, but at the same time, still moving forward, not being held back and not being delayed. So you were told great stories and read great stories of people's lives, biographies, it sounds like. When did you start to form in your mind ideas about what you wanted to do with your life as a career, in high school? Where were you and what were you enjoying at that point in time?
That's a huge challenge. I would say one of the, I have a friend who describes those really difficult seasons in life as a dark night of the soul. And I would say my first taste of a dark night of the soul was in high school, where I was overwhelmed by what I should do. I felt like there was too many options in life. There was, all these things out there. And I really wanted to do what was best. I was really I just wanted to do what was best, what was right. I had that idea in my mind that I should do something, but I didn't know what to do. And so that stress and I would say anxiety was really heavy. And my mom and dad gave me some really great wisdom in that. But what I started to discover is that you can have analysis paralysis, where you spend all your time thinking about, oh, I could do this, or I could do this, I could do this. Sometimes you have to make a choice, and you have to start walking forward. And if it's not the right path, you'll get the signals. The doors will close, the windows will close, the guards will stand there and say, no, go the other way. And or you start to realize, no, this isn't what I really want. This isn't really what's fulfilling to me. So I had to make some key choices. And one of the things that was happening was politics was a mess. Politics was in the news every day, lying, cheating politicians and all that kind of stuff. And I remember kind of doing the normal grousey thing where, it's like, oh, complain about this, complain about that, and, politics and the news, blah, 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 blah. And I had a really clear question that formed in my mind, and it said, Jeremiah, what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do? And I realized I better do. So instead of sit around and grouse, I needed to figure out what to do. And so I thought, well, I don't know really much about politics. I'd never volunteered on a campaign. I didn't know any politicians. It was not in my experience pool. So I thought, well, I had just heard about a college that opened up in Virginia called Patrick Henry College, which was founded by the Homeschool Legal Defense Association. My parents had asked me about it years before, and I'd been like, I'm not really interested in that. But it came to mind again, and I thought, well, if I'm going to learn about politics, I may as well go to D.C. I decided to apply to Patrick Henry College, and you get that roller coaster feeling because you apply, you feel like, yeah, I think I'm doing what I should be doing. And then I got a rejection letter. They said no, you're and it was great. Well, horrible for Jeremiah. But my mom, unbeknownst to me, she calls Patrick Henry and she's like, so what could he have done better? And they said, well, his reading list didn't have enough classics. His grades weren't high enough. His experience, his resume, basically everything.
Start over.
And if I had watched How to Train Your Dragon, I would have been, you just gestured to all of me. But so it was a rejection letter, and I wasn't really sure what to do. But I had just taken the SAT again, and the previous 2 times I had taken it, I had gotten the exact same score. But I had just taken it again, and I was doing the grousey thing where I was like, oh, woe is me, I don't know what to do now. The one thing I thought I should do is now off the table. But I got a phone call, and it was from Patrick Henry, and they said, congratulations, you've been admitted. Call us. It was a voicemail, so it was like, call us back. I'm like, what? And it was after business hours in Virginia, so I couldn't talk to them then. So I had to call them the next morning. But I'm like, what happened? What changed? Well, I call them and find out that they got my scores from my third SAT try, and before I did. So they had seen them, and they were accepting me on the improvement. They said, it still wasn't a very impressive score, but the fact that you were able to go up, I think it was 120 points. Tells us that you have the stick-to-itiveness to come to this school. And so that was, it was like, there's the emotional roller coaster and everything, but I did feel like that was a confirmation. It was like, yeah, this is what I really thought I should be doing. This is what I wanted to do. And then it was no, and I didn't really feel any other options. And then the door opened again. So that's kind of took me from, kind of the adventure, horseback riding, playing in the woods, Jeremiah, to, okay, well, what am I going to do about the world that I'm living in? And maybe take these ideas, these inspiration, the wisdom from these great stories, and try to use that to make a difference. And so kind of stepped away from Colorado, moved away from the home of my entire childhood, Colorado, there in the shadow of the Rocky Mountains, to the Beltway of Washington, D.C. And I went to school at Patrick Henry and started getting involved in politics there.
That's really great. I didn't realize you went to Patrick Henry College. And we'll be right back.
We are so excited to introduce our listeners to a new app that just launched. Basecamp Ed is a community building platform for parents to find like-minded families and dedicated teachers in your area. Whether you homeschool your children, are curious about it, or simply want to build extracurricular activities, Basecamp Ed has you covered. Connect with local parents to create co-ops, form groups based on your child's interests, and use the calendar to schedule events with ease. Teachers and coaches can also create profiles and list their credentials for parents to use as a way to supplement subjects and activities. Homeschooling was never meant to be done alone. It takes a village. Build it with Basecamp Ed. Take advantage of this free resource and go download it today. You can also follow them on Instagram and Facebook at Basecamp Ed App for the latest updates.
And now back to the show. So, I knew that you started working in politics. So can you tell us a little bit about like where you started with politics and like what your trajectory was as you were attending Patrick Henry? What was your major?
I
Government.
studied
Okay.
government. So it was kind of like a political science degree, but Patrick Henry is a little different. They called it a government degree.
Very cool. So where did you begin?
But yeah, how to get involved in politics? It's kind of like getting involved in the arts, which my sisters and mom did. But you have to kind of do it for free. You have to volunteer. So you got to volunteer on campaigns. I remember meeting the President of the United States through a volunteer opportunity. There was you gotta throw yourself in and become familiar with what's needed and everything there. And so I did that starting as a freshman at Patrick Henry, volunteering on campaigns, going into DC, doing various events, interning. I did several internships and everything. And then when I graduated from Patrick Henry, and I now had this experience, I applied for a job at HSLDA, the Homeschool Legal Defense Association. They needed a lobbyist to work in Washington, D.C., and I was like, well, that might be a good fit for me. I didn't have a real clear idea of what my next step should be, so I applied there. But I had that in my head. I had the idea of I will apply and I'll work there for 18 months. Where I got 18 months, I don't know. That was just, in my head. But I was like, I'll work there for 18 months and then I'll step into, working on the Hill, in an office or, something like that, senator's office, who knows. And I have a letter written by Mike Ferris that I had him write that was a letter of recommendation to a high-ranking member of Congress. But I never used it. And I never used it because in that beginning, when I started working at HSLDA, being an advocate for homeschooling freedom in Washington, D.C., I also was exposed to a program called Generation Joshua. And Generation Joshua was founded by HSLDA, and it was designed to equip young people to make their voice known. And it kind of, rung a bell. It's the question, Jeremiah, what are you going to do about it? And I thought of all the kids who needed some ways that they can learn what they can do about it. So I started building simulations for them because, Generation Joshua was like, hey, you work with Congress as a lobbyist. Could you help us build a Congress simulation? So I built a Congress simulation. I started working on other simulations. We built the summer camps, and basically I got more and more sucked into working with Generation Joshua and the students. And I discovered something that I had gotten a taste of when I was a student at Patrick Henry, because I had started teaching the Patrick Henry College Fencing Club. Which was very amateur. I never was a fantastic fencer, but I knew the basics, and I discovered I was not a bad teacher there. And then I started applying that same thing, the teaching, to Generation Joshua and teaching high schoolers. And I really fell in love with that. And so that became more and more my responsibilities. And that kind of grew to the point where today I'm the director of Generation Joshua.
How old were you when you started Generation Joshua?
Ooh, that's a good question. It was right after college. So early 20s.
So you never had an opportunity, because that's when it started, I would imagine, right? When they first started. So you never actually had an opportunity to be involved in something like that yourself as a student.
No.
But man, what y'all have created there is amazing. So, it's a beautiful simulation experience. It truly is. And the more I learn over the years about it and hear about it, the more impressed I am with it. It's just one of those things that the depth of it continues to make, you really aware of how much investment goes into thinking about it. And as you see, like with me, with my own kids who've done Generation Joshua now, I've been a part of it for years, and how it still the things they say on a daily basis, things that will come out, or the way that they're choosing to make decisions, or quotes that they use. All of it, like not all of it, but so much of it comes out in their everyday lives. And, I'm thinking back to something that you said about being accepted to Patrick Henry College. And basically, in short words, it sounds like you weren't well read enough. So you fixed that, right? Because I know you read a lot.
I read a lot now.
So talk a little bit about that. And, again, you were a person who had challenges with dyslexia. Reading is, something that is fun when there's no challenge in it, and you can read fast and take it all in. But to take in some of those, classics that are epic and long reads, how was that for you to move into that kind of reading, really on your own? Because I know, like I said, I know you read a lot now and you're very well read. And I just am curious about that, because to me, having a kid who has struggled with dyslexia and seeing that really was not a hindrance for what you want to do. It's just sometimes it impacts how it goes. So how did that go for you? Moving into college, moving into studying, moving into diving deeper into, your own personal reading. How did that translate?
Yeah, and it's a windy road. The reality was, difficult to read, so I started reading late, and then it was slow going up until college. And once I hit college, I discovered audiobooks, and audiobooks were super helpful. And I think I was really well set up for them because my parents read to me all the time. And so growing up being read to, because I couldn't read myself, I developed my ability to process audiobooks pretty well, and I could do that. So I think that was a huge turning of the page, to be metaphorical for a second, in terms of my reading journey. And then, also I've never been as fast of a reader, but because I'm slow, my mind also dwells more on the content. So I do tend to remember more of what I read than a lot of my fellow students at Patrick Henry, for example. So my reading comprehension actually went up pretty high, although it was slow. And to this day, I don't have enough time to read physical books that often, because it's a slow process. But if I'm in the car, if I'm driving to work, if I'm doing chores, I have an audiobook going. And I kind of made that my thing. I was like, I want to always be growing myself, and I think stories help us do that. And so I now what I do is I take turns. I take turns between a serious book. So like I'll be reading something like an ancient Greek wrote, like Plato's Republic, or something like that. And then I'll read something like Tolkien, maybe one of Tolkien's short stories. And I take turns going back and forth between what I call a serious book, which I read for education and expanding my knowledge, and a fiction book, which I read to expand my wisdom and enjoyment. And so I always have something to look forward to, and I'm always growing some area. And I tend to try to, for me, I'm a generalist. I'm not a specialist. I don't really deep dive onto any one topic. So I dabble in philosophy, I dabble in literature, I dabble in history and biography, and all those things. And so I read books that it's like, oh, I've never even heard of that. I'm going to read about the Mongols today. I don't know anything about the Mongols. And then the next book might be on existential thought, or a church father, somebody in the 2nd century writing about, or the 3rd century. One of my favorites is Athanasius of Alexandria. He wrote about why did Jesus come in the flesh and what does that mean for us? And it's literally one of the most profound books I've ever read. And it was written almost 2,000 years ago. And he's writing about the deep, profound meaning of the gospel story. And he wrote it when he was like 25, That's maybe. Crazy. He was very young. And so it's a very remarkable at the time young man. And if you do pick it up, I do highly recommend to anybody in the audience to make sure you get a copy that has C.S. Lewis's introduction, because it's also goes by, I think, the essay title of Why Read Old Books. But it's a brilliant little essay that reminds us that reading old books helps us to have a wider perspective, because we're not limited to just the perspective of our era with its blind spots. We can see kind of through other people's eyes. And I also read books, one of my favorite books was written by a Chinese woman, and she's telling the story of growing up in China under Mao, and the communist experience. And her father and mother were communist revolutionaries. They wanted to bring in something that they thought would really help the people, and then they end up becoming victims of that regime. And like reading from other cultures, other times, it widens your perspective. And they have blind spots, of course, but they're not the same blind spots that we have. So it's helpful for us to have that wider perspective.
That's very interesting. Life. So, and listening to you now talk about some of the books you've read and a little bit about your experience, when and where did your interest in travel, when did that one set in? Because I know that you are also well traveled. And
so I would say it comes from my mom. She is the adventurous spirit. My dad's more of a homebody. He loves his family, and he's a stable. He's the stability in our family, and my mom's the adventure, and we need both. And so I see them both as heroes and examples. But my mom, her adventurous spirit, she loves to travel. She had grown up in the military, as a military child, so all over the world, mostly in I think it was Italy. I would have to ask her. I know a lot of time in Puerto Rico and some in California, so in the U.S. and then abroad as well. But she, when I was a little kid, we were in Ohio for a wedding. And one day my mom said, all right, go to bed early because we're going to get up at 3 a.m. and we're going to drive to Canada because we're going to see Niagara Falls. And so we got up at 3 a.m.
So funny.
And drove to Niagara Falls, and we went to Canada, and we walked around. We did a whole little tour thing, and it was like 3 in the afternoon before we actually got lunch. So we were ravenous, and we had hot dogs. And we, to this day, my siblings and I who were there, we will say that the best hot dogs we ever had were Canadian hot dogs. They may have been that much better, or it may have been the hunger. They were seasoned with hunger. But so that was my first real international adventure. But it wasn't until after college I was a friend of mine reached out to me, who I got connected to through Generation Joshua, and he said, "Hey Jeremiah, there's a political meeting in London. Would you like to go?" And I was like, "Sure, I've never been." And so we went to London, and it was a great adventure. We saw so many things. Well, one of my favorites was I went to, we were young and we didn't have a lot of money, and we had spent it all on the plane tickets, right? So we're trying to figure out how to do the most with spending the least. And we're standing outside of Westminster Abbey, and Westminster is it's a beautiful, beautiful church. And we were like, oh, is it worth £30 to go in and do a tour? And it's like, that's a lot of money. And, it's like $50, but it's, it's iconic. It looks really cool. And we're we're literally standing there looking at it, kind of calculating how much money do we have left, and, want to go into this church. And then I looked down and I realized, wait, it's a church. They have service times. There's a service in an hour. So let's just go to a cafe, get some disappointing British food, and then come back and we'll go to church. And so we did. And it was a very small service because I guess it was not a popular night. And we went there, and it was called the Evensong service. And I had never experienced anything like it. But we were it was like, us and maybe 20 other people up amongst the choir as they sung the scriptures. And it was beautiful, beautiful, beautiful moment. And then the sermon was beautiful. Everything about it was uplifting of my soul. And it was phenomenal. And it was so good that we were like, let's do it again tomorrow. And so we did some adventures that day, and then we went to service again the next night. But it was a popular night, and it was very crowded. Hundreds of people were there. We were sitting off in the middle of nowhere. You couldn't even see the choir. I've been diagnosed with dyslexia. I have not been diagnosed with ADD or ADHD, but I'm pretty sure that I have a little bit of that because I'm sitting there distracted and looking around. And then I realized I'm sitting on a gravestone, because they bury people in the churches. And I'm looking around, and I'm trying not to be obvious that I'm distracted and trying to see who I'm sitting on. But I'm trying to get an angle on it, trying until finally, I think it was at one point where we had to stand up. To stand up, I leaned over and I saw I was sitting on William Wilberforce's tomb. And William Wilberforce is a hero of mine, and I was so excited. And now, to this day, I tell people, I went to church with William Wilberforce. He was dead, and I was sitting on him, but I went to church with William Wilberforce.
That is a great story. One I've never heard. How did I not hear this one? That's incredible. Oh, my goodness. So you then fell in love with traveling and made a way to do that, right? So tell us a little bit more about some of your outstanding adventures in travel.
So I started, I was like, oh, I like this. So started going to places with a lot of ancient history, which I love. So Rome, Greece, and I was traveling in Greece when, and I was just kind of helping. I was a more adult member of the group. So there was Dr. Favelo, who was a Patrick Henry College professor, who was leading the group, and I was an adult, and then there was a bunch of college students. And so I was driving one of the vehicles, and there was a moment where it clicked. I was like, this is now my I think it was my third time to Greece, and I was like, I could do this myself. I don't need to tag along with somebody else's trip. I can say, oh yeah, we're going to go here, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do this. And so with that, my travel company was born, and it's a very small thing. It's just kind of on my spare time. What I'll do is I'll lead tour groups to my favorite places. A couple months ago, I guess it was in the spring, early spring, I led a group to Egypt, and we had a great time. Cool places that I love, and I tend to focus them around literature and kind of those iconic moments. But so for me, what unlocked that idea was realizing I could do this. I don't have to rely on somebody else to put together a trip. I can do it, and I've been leading these groups for probably 10 years, maybe 10 years. Or so now. And, because I've been working in the nonprofit space for a long time, so I don't have a ton of disposable income. And I realized, oh, well, I can, I don't make money on it, but I can lead these trips and they can help subsidize my traveling bug. It was kind of a business idea that came out of my desire to see more of the world with a very limited budget. So kind of like ending up in Westminster for the service. You sometimes limited resources spawns creativity.
Absolutely. So fast forwarding a little bit. So you've been with Generation Joshua now for a number of years. So, 18 years. I was
18
going to say
years.
it's close to 20, right? That's crazy. And you have recently, made a decision to move into another era now. So can you share a little bit about what you're doing moving forward and how that is driven by what passions you have and interests you have now?
One of my friends who was on the Egypt trip that I just mentioned, she had studied abroad in Belgium at a school in Belgium that's 600 years old. And she was telling me all about it. And I thought, that sounds really interesting. And when God started opening and closing doors in my life, I thought, wait, that idea has been in the back of my mind. And sometimes we have to pay attention to the things that linger, right? Something sticks in our mind, and maybe it's for a reason. And so I thought, wait, maybe I should try applying to the school. And but I got on their website and it was past the deadline. And I thought, well, maybe not. But I emailed them and said, hey, would you accept a late application? And they said, sure. And so I've applied to and been accepted, and I'm planning to move to Belgium in 1 month, in a short period of time. And it's going to be a one year abroad. And I intend to use that time to, yes, get a master's degree, but also to really experience these different cultures. And instead of just reading about them, spend some time there and get to know some people and actually see the sights. Like one of the places I really want to go to is Corrie ten Boom. During World War II, she was a Dutch Christian who felt that she needed to stand up for the Jews in her community. And so when they were required to wear the Star of David and labels of Jew and stuff like that in public, and so that the Nazis could persecute them and arrest them and disappear them, she started to stand up to that. And she was like I can't remember her age, but I think she was in her 50s when she started this. And her whole story is inspiring, but they built a hiding place in their house so that if they were ever raided, they could hide the people the Nazis were looking for behind this wall. And that's what happened. And she ended up saving them. Her father and her sister were both killed in concentration camps. She survived and told the story. And she did a lot of work to bring reconciliation between the people in the concentration camps and the perpetrators. And it was, very, very beautiful story. I highly recommend anybody who hasn't read it, The Hiding Place. But I want to go there. I want to find that house. It's called the Beignet, and climb the stairs to that upstairs room, and then maybe stick my head in there and see the place where lives were actually saved by somebody who was inspired to ask the question, well, what are you going to do about it? And so things like that are kind of the things I want to spend a year exploring, and then see what's next. I don't know what's next, but I do know that life is an adventure. Right? For me, it always has been, whether it's leading students in Generation Joshua on adventures on political campaigns, or at summer camp, or just when my mom woke me up one time in Colorado. She was like, "Hey, let's go out and watch the moonrise. People watch the sunrise, but let's watch the moonrise tonight." And so life is an adventure, and so I'm looking forward to this next adventure.
That's fantastic. I know that those are the things that inspire and continue to encourage us to grow. And it's like I said, I think that one of the most important things you can teach a child and embrace as an adult yourself is the understanding that we are constantly learning and growing. we don't ever get done, and I think that's one of the things that kind of pushes me, as I continue to stretch and reach into the next thing or experience something different. It's because in my mind, it's like I've got a lot of years. I'm not done. Like, that's how you feel. So I think that's inspiring, and I'm glad that you're able to share that feeling with students. And I know you've had so many great experiences teaching, and being, a part of Generation Joshua. And that there's a lot of students that are going to miss that time that they'll have, that they won't have with you. But I know too that outside of Generation Joshua, you've invested your time in serving in other capacities, serving in your community and on boards, different foundations. What else is an interest to you that you would say is worth, I think there's the idea of never leaving any part of yourself behind, and we know you, I know you because of HSLDA and Generation Joshua for the years I've known you, but just knowing that there are other things that you've invested in, what types of things do you spend other time outside invested in?
Oh, that's a good question. For me, one of the things that I'm excited about is I've been involved with a ministry called Christian Freedom International, and they serve persecuted Christians around the world. And so through them, I've had opportunities to speak with North Korean defectors and people who fled persecution in places like Pakistan. And so I love being able to hear those stories and learn from those stories and then share those stories, because I think it's really important for us to remember the world is bigger than us. And so we can be a little spoiled here in the United States. And as passionate as I am for my country and my people here, one of the things I think we need is some of that outside perspective, and we can hear from people who have lost so much and can speak wisdom to us. So Christian Freedom International is a big thing for me. Another thing that I have not done yet, I like telling stories, and I intend to keep telling stories, maybe on Instagram Reels or something like that, so that my Generation Joshua students can still get some of that, because I'll be abroad, and so maybe I'll be at a place like Waterloo Battlefield and just give a 2-minute recap.
Yes, I'll be watching for that.
That's my hope. But yeah, there you go. But I'm also looking forward to whatever the next stage is. I would like to write some of my stories, and I've written for like the HSLDA magazine and for some other publications, little things that whether it's talking to. So I just recently published a piece in the HSLDA magazine, Court Report magazine, with a conversation with the North Korean defector. And I want to tell some of those stories, maybe in longer form. So maybe a future version of Jeremiah that's not quite so sleep deprived from working with teenagers at summer camps and on political campaigns will have time to write some. So we'll see.
Phenomenal. We will look forward to that. So I know we're going to wrap it up here in a second, and I just want to ask you, because I can ask you a lot of questions and talk through a lot of the things and the stories from just Generation Joshua over the years that, I've known you. But I think that in my experience and understanding, you've inspired a lot of students. And a lot of that was with words and quotes and stories that you shared. So if I were to ask you if there were some quote or some story or some verse that was super important that had really impacted you, maybe, and inspired you to move through your journey and come to the place you are now, or if there's something that you would say you've learned that you would really share with someone to encourage them to do the same types of, things that you've done as you've leaned into your passions and your abilities. What would you share?
Oh man, there's so many beautiful stories. Some of them that I've already touched on in this conversation. But I think one of the things that's very important to me, and I know Ethan has really honed in on this, it's the Micah 6:8 verse from the Old Testament. And the prophet is talking to people, and he's saying, there are three things that you should do. There are three things that will better society. He says, what does God require of you? And he says to do justice, and that means do what's right by other people, and stand up for other people. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "A threat to justice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." So, do justice, chase after that, stand up for other people, and then love mercy. And that means have a tender heart. Let your heart be tender to other people and their situations, to the struggles that are happening around you. Don't be blind. Don't be too optimistic that you can't see the hurt that's there. My mom says, one of the most challenging things is, there's another verse in Scripture that says there's a time to rejoice and a time to weep, or rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. And she says oftentimes that's at the same time. You have some friends that are rejoicing and some friends that are weeping. But let your heart be tender to other people and their situations and their needs and what's there. And then the final thing he says to love justice, or pursue justice, love mercy. And then he says, walk humbly. Just walk humbly. Don't think more highly of yourself than you ought. That doesn't mean beat yourself up. It doesn't mean consider yourself worthless. That's not the definition of humility. Humility is seeing yourself for who you really are. And when you know yourself and you see yourself through that lens, you're gonna live different. You're not gonna be pushing yourself above other people or below other people. I know both are a huge challenge in society. Look at the mental health of so many people, and I think it's largely due to not really seeing who you were designed to be, and how life is custom built for you that's going to be different than everybody else. Stop comparing. So like that idea that comes down to us from almost 3,000 years ago is something that still moves my heart and helps shape my decisions in big and little ways. And I think that there's so many ideas and quotes and stories, but that's the one that comes to my mind, and I'm really thankful for Ethan and. So I don't know if everybody knows your son Ethan is phenomenal. I love him, and he's done a lot to raise awareness of that verse and what it can mean for us.
I appreciate that a lot, and I think that there's much to be said for justice and mercy and humility and embracing those things. That's the perfect mixture of what it means to live out our lives as a Christian, to shine, in such a way that people see Christ in us. So I love that. I really do. I thank you for sharing that. It's going to be hard not seeing you around here for a little bit, but I cannot wait to see what you're going to be doing. And you've got to share some of those stories, the little storytelling. I mean, now you've said it. So we're going to be looking for it because it'll be live vicariously.
Heard it here first on the FPEA podcast.
Right here. So, but thank you for your time today. And maybe we can do this again and hear more of an update later on about where you are and what's happening. But I appreciate your time today, and thank you for sharing your story and Thank you for being an inspiration to so many through these last 18 years. But it's going to go far beyond that. So I look forward to seeing what still comes.
Well, thanks for having me on the show, and for your friendship and your years of service with FPEA. It's always been a highlight of my year, so I'm gonna miss it too.
There you go. But thank you, and we will look forward to talking again really soon. Thanks for listening to the Not by the Book podcast from the Florida Parent Educators Association. To learn more about homeschooling in Florida, or to find resources to help you on this amazing journey, visit our website at FPEA.com. If you have any suggestions for future guests, contact me, Suzanne, at notbythebook@FPEA.com. Thanks again for listening, and be inspired to live your life not by the book.